Good morning, Yatin sir, and welcome to Design Dialogues hosted by Rethinking the Future in collaboration with Publis. This is your host Bhavya, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Yatin, the visionary founder and principal architects of Footprints E.A.R.T.H. Thank you for joining us, sir, today.
Namaskar. Thank you. Thanks for having me and season's greetings.
Just to give a brief introduction about you and your firm, Footprints E.A.R.T.H, led by Yatin Pandya, is an architecture firm specializing in sustainable design, environmental research, and affordable housing. Their work integrates traditional wisdom with modern innovation, creating socially and ecologically responsible solutions. Beyond design, the firm engages in academic initiatives, advocacy, and research to promote cultural heritage and sustainability. So before starting the question, sir, I would like you to tell that this interview will be published on the website of Publish. So sign up on the Publish website and you will get the access to watch this interview. So shall we proceed with the question, sir?
Yes, of course. Pleasure.
So first question for the day is, so how does your studio, Footprints Earth, ensure sustainable practices in each phase of design from concept to execution?
I think it's very integral aspect of being a professional, and as a professional, you might be hired by an individual client, but you are responsible as well as responsive to the place, people, and planet. I believe that any design, the holistic consideration has to go through six fundamental concerns or factors, which includes timeless aesthetics, socio-cultural appropriateness, environmental sustainability, economic affordability, functional efficiency, and structural stability. So, of course, therefore, environmental sustainability is a very much integral consideration in all your design decisions. So, once you factor it in as basic fundamental response for which you are hired, then right from concept to detailing, it falls in place, and it's that consistency that derives the eventual resolution which addresses that as well as other concerns. So it's very much a aspect and obligation of a professional service.
What were the key social and environmental objectives that guided the design of Manav Sadhna Activity Center?
Manav Sadhana Activity Center happens to have been situated in one of the largest slum or squatter settlements of Ahmedabad. And most of the families thrive on rag picking, kind of women go out early morning and pick up the waste from the city, the street, as well as municipal and the domestic segments. So actually, it was coincidental that we had been working. It was an outcome or realization after 3 years of very intense research on what happens to the waste which is thrown in the city. Just to give an example, that city of Ahmedabad alone had been at that time 2,600 metric ton of waste being thrown out every day. And it was simply being dumped in one place called Pirana. And Ahmedabad doesn't have any geographic feature, but because of the dumping site, it eventually rose to become a 70 feet tall mountain of waste. So we're wondering that can we think of something? And we in India have a very strong sense of recycling. But despite that sense, much of the waste is not being handled. So we actually embarked on a research that domestic as well as the municipal waste, can we do something about it? And then after the research, there were three kind of basic objective to solve by one solution. One was environmental positivity, that now that if you don't dump the waste, it in fact improves the whole reduction in the pollution that you have otherwise created by throwing it out. So that was one of the concern. The second one was that by recycling the waste as a building component, you actually are generating an alternative economical stream. So the same people who have been handling the waste can engage into this transformation, and their economic capabilities and thereby quality of life improves. So economic upliftment was another factor. And in that hidden was also the gender equity, because or upliftment, because most of the rec picking activities being done by the women. The third one was to improve their own habitat, because they in a slum they use this waste from secondary material as a building component. And we were researching this, put ourselves this challenge that what we would come up with as an alternative material recycled out of the waste would be cheaper and performing or better, including aesthetic, than the one that they've been using. So, environment, economy, and the housing, all three were integral, expected kind of goals of that particular activity. And we got a chance to do this activity center out of that research. And we were happy to apply and demonstrate that in that particular project.
So, can you also elaborate on the challenges that were faced while integrating traditional earthen construction with modern design requirements in this project?
Actually, tradition and modernity, I believe more in India that we have hyped it. When we say tradition, my definition is not that it's opposite of history, it's not the synonym to history. In fact, you could say if it's opposite. To me, history is a dead tradition, while tradition is a living history, something coming from past, but if it still continues to be part of us today, that is what is the kind of as much contemporary, because its survival today is in itself a proof of those values being shared even in a changed time and circumstances. And I think in India, as tradition, what we have is a kind of constant truth that kind of prevails. So, for example, very strong sense of recycling that we have always had. We have always believed in also incarnation, and we thought that why not give a new avatar, a new kind of incarnation to some of these West? So it was, in fact, in that ideology, in that philosophy. But what we come up with is, as I said, more economically kind of competitive, more aesthetically pleasing. In fact, I must thank the fraternity that this project, despite being within the economic constraint for the so-called underprivileged in Islam, but it won several awards even as pure design kind of outcome. So it was that how could we use those principles and still apply it for its present day performance. So I think it was very natural to think of, just to give an example, that the colorful bottles that come from either the acid or a liquor or whatnot. Now, those put in a western side, west is a low sun. No overhang can cut down that glare. But the tainted glass not only cuts down the glare very effectively, but it also gives a very wonderful glow with internal reflection. So actually, it's a very exciting and a very kind of charming solution in one of the places that is we put in. And therefore, although it has been used in a activity center like Manav Sadhna, it is also been, put in one of the farmhouses. So it's not that this is kind of a poor compromise. I think the solutions are very vibrant and can be used in any applicable situations of that sort. So I think tradition modernity is not an antithesis. On the contrary, the kind of wisdom that is continued and is still relevant in present time for their performance criteria that if they still find the aesthetic awe, many of the monuments we go to, they have still been exciting, and we go to those places even as a ruins to visit. It's purely that spatial pull and the kind of timeless aesthetics. So can we not learn from those? That second part, that if it was pre-electricity days, and if it still was able to manage the kind of thermal comfort or environmental sustainability, then why don't we not learn that and reduce our energy needs and dependence on mechanized services? And third, traditional resolutions had been for people, by people, of people, so they have been socio-culturally very relevant. So if therefore, if we learn from those, we won't go wrong and it won't be alienated to the context. So for all these reasons, learning from the traditional wisdom was a very natural thing to do to make it very relevant for today as a foundation for tomorrow.
So, in your experience, how does designing for underserved communities differ from other institutional or commercial projects?
Actually, in fact, one thing was that this group of people, as I said, what we put a challenge that it has to be within both their affordability range as well as it has to perform better than alternative that they have been otherwise using. So we had actually all the scientific tests done before we kind of actually applied. So we had an empirical study out of the theoretical study, and we figured that what works best for them. And in many of them, they even participated. So it was more put up as a demonstration in a squatter settlement so that they can look at it, they can get convinced about some of these and on their own, because even the technology that was used was something that you can do self-help. And there were a couple of positive indications of that, that one of the lowest kind of rung of the society that existed there, they took up on their own to pick up, the Altin container, opened up and turned it into a walling and door and lure kind of an option. And in fact, they even bettered because they knew how to put up a stencil of gods and goddesses and paint it over and all. So we were happy to see this replication by people on their own. And this center also grew, and we made some 4 or 5 extensions to that. And even the clients sailed along, and so did the users. And we were able to add a different palette of material every time that we added. So it even became a kind of an exploratory ground for us to explore more and more waste material to translate. So even people who initially had resistance, but they saw the performance and they sailed with it. And in fact, third, kind of a spin-off of that was that some other architect also doing similar kind of an activity adopted some such principles and some such solutions, etc. And in academic circuit, this sort of became a case study, and it gave the new young minds reason to look for alternative, and has been upright, tried, or explored even in academia in that sense. So I think it was a demonstration value of that was high, and some things came up in media, and in fact, even the developers approached us that commercially can these products be made available to our project, and it was a healthy sign. Of course, we were not the producer, so it was just an academic exploration. So, but nonetheless, the kind of reception that it received, and that project withstood for several decades that since that it's been done, was itself the kind of validity, proof, and the appropriateness for the given context. The resistance, of course, came initially where both the client, first of all, thought, and of course, I must give credit to them that they gave us the freedom. But the bottom line was that they said that don't make us guinea pig. These are, I mean, it's an NGO, they get very limited funding to do so. And it should not appear that, it's being done for the slum dwellers and therefore it's compromise or poor. But as I said, that there was a research and the actual test done for all the parameters that should have been gone in there. And after that, and initially, of course, even the contractors would be hesitant to try out something different than the typical that they have been used to following. But I think that initial things break up once the performance starts showing. And as a result, as I said, the proof of that conviction was that 5 extensions, it continued to go with those kinds of concepts. And there, some another center was also done similarly by another set of architects. So I think there are always some mental blocks, but with the valid kind of reasons and the proofs and the demonstration, I think that can be overcome.
So, sir, what strategies does your studio employ to maintain consistency in delivering eco-friendly architecture across diverse project types?
I think it's part of the primary concern, and that's not the only one. As I said, socio-cultural appropriateness, or as I said, that every project has to be appropriate to place, people, and planet. It's not like I always say that our profession is similar to that of a doctor. You go to a doctor to get diagnosed, and doctor only gives you, it's not that what he knows, he applies that to identify that what's particular to you. So it's like that, that every place, every program, every context, and every kind of thing has its own sort of relevant answer and solution. So I think that is the whole thing about contextually responsive design. And once you do that, all these factors naturally come in. Like I always say, even if it's like for a twin brothers, and they say, oh, give us very identical thing, but you can't mirror the house because sun is not same north or south or east or west. So I think you have to, if you look at all those concerns or all those factors, then naturally every project, every resolution would come appropriate to, as I said, place, people, program, and planet. So I think that real motto gives each one a unique start, that it's not replication of what you've done earlier. Strategies, concerns remain the same, but I think looking each patient in its right way, in its own way, gives the same kind of appropriate solution. And that also gives the excitement that every project is seen as you have a fresh start. You look at it on its own kind of situation and merit, and that's why that engagement comes out. It's not that, oh, we've done that yesterday and let's start today. I think every day it's a fresh start, and then as if you're just approaching it freshly, but with the kind of concerns that you held important. So I think it is very obvious for that to reflect. Final outcome may be whatever, but I think in the design decisions, they always become part of that consideration. And when the team knows this, then even they kind of sometime would discuss out that, yeah, but how about this or how about that? So I think it becomes a part of a work culture then.
And remembering, sir, the doctor's statement you just mentioned, me being an architect myself, I remember when we used to be in our college doing bachelors of architecture, it's the first thing our professors used to teach us, that our profession is very similar to doctors, but doctors can bury their mistakes. But as an architect, you have to live with it until you die to know that you have done something wrong. So it's better that you do something right for the community. So I remember that when you mentioned the doctor's
Yes,
statement.
as an
So,
architect, we alter the landscape, and even our mistake would perpetuate beyond us.
yes,
So our responsibility is
yes,
higher that it doesn't die
yeah,
with us.
yes, sir. So, this is the next question. So, what were the core design principles that guided the creation of Environmental Sanitation Institute, and how do they reflect your firm's ethos?
Environmental Sanitation Institute was kind of a new campus for what earlier in Gandhi Ashram premise used to be known as Safai Vidyalaya. And it was kind of operated by a Gandhian kind of disciple. It was kind of founded by Ishwar Bhai Patel, the Gandhian disciple. It was called Toilet Guru, and this was in a kind of a suburban site, and there were no kind of drainage, water supply, or other sort of ready to install kind of infrastructural services. So that is where one, there was a priority to make it in a way self-sufficient with all of these. And also I think the institute or the architecture must in a sense practice what it preaches. So here their primary motto was to see how can we have alternative sanitation, so that the whole core reason for untouchability was that people who clean behind you, you consider them untouchable while you should be doing that yourself. So the idea of you know self-engagement to certain things, and so it was therefore a kind of a start. That is where now the site, a lot of those things about site and site with this overarching concern led to the kind of resolution. For example, the site typically being in the suburb was once a sort of a rural site, or in a sense it was for the farmland, and then the roads came later, so the land was much lower. We were kind of 9 inches below the adjoining road, and typically now roads all around, it would be like a cesspool after the rains. So usual tendency is to bring whole trucks load of mitti, the soil from outside, and level it up higher than the road. So we said that no, that means a lot of petrol, a lot of energy, a lot of undue, and somewhere else it would create some problem where from where it's dug. So we said that no, we'll manage all that on site. So it became a cut and fill idea, even though practically the site was flat, but it was most sensible to do cut and fill. And as a result, we started with simple calculator at our disposal that okay, if we dig so much here, and we didn't want to make a very basement situation which won't be livable with light, ventilation, and view. So eye level is what below that is what we accepted to go down up to. So accordingly, we saw that what functions like daytime functions are good to bury below ground, so that there's earth burning advantage also in a hot, dry climate. And likewise, we found that now that was not adequate, and we thought of what about water harvesting, and we dug a pond, and then we created amphitheater. So likewise, we found where we could go below ground, and that soil parked on the same site. Now we are 9 inches above the adjoining road, and there's no even fistful of soil being imported or exported out of that. So that was soil management. Now, where you have the dugout place, then those were the activities where daytime use, would be there, and as a result, it would give you the insulation in a hot, dry climate, in a warm times. So that also helped mutually. Then water, there we said no drop of water would go out. So 2.2 million, 22 lakh liter water is harvested there in three ways: by percolating in the ground at three or four places. That is essentially the pathway or a groundwater level. Then the all the landscape part is drained into open pond, and the roof water, which is relatively cleaner, is taken into underground water tank. And this water tank was also integrated with the design of the structure, so that when you do the tank, its wall itself becomes both the foundation as well as the shared wall with the classroom and all. So that also gives you the cool edge, and you have less expense to do the tank, etc. And fourth version was also recycling the waste, because there are no municipal services. So we had a root zone system, which is natural Australis fragmentis plant species, then the pebble bed. So after 40 days, it brings back the water treated enough just to be either used for reflushing the toilet or for irrigation. And that's how we had double piping to do so. And the other half of the toilets were put to biogas. So it also generated some gas to be able to cook some things in addition to what you otherwise would have needed. So I think that's how the whole process began. Then local material, and so brick and the natural palette of material like stone, etc., come in. Now, the brick we used as a cavity wall construction, and that also ventilated cavity. So not only there is an air gap, which takes all the services also inside, so it's also aesthetically included. There is also convenience of wiring, etc., because of that. But it also becomes, there's a ventilation. There are ventilating cowls at the bottom and top. So even the heat trapped inside, it escapes out, by the convective principles. So there's a huge kind of thermal kind of insulation from outside to inside. Same with the roof. It's a ferrocement roof, which is thin, so less material, but it could communicate more heat. So there is a vermiculite feeling, and then the china mosaic, which is white, glossy, and reflective, and it can retard the heat. So one through construction, then through the design itself, that you have southwest as taller masses and northeast as not only lower but sunken, so that there's mutual shading, and there are terraces which you can come out to. So it doubles up the use of surfaces even above the building, and which are accessible naturally from upper level levels, so that you don't have to go up for just exclusive reasons. It's a natural routine. So that's how it also optimized the use of land, that you could now use the upper floors, terraces also as an outdoor open spaces, then multiple courtyards. So you have for different season and different activities, and outdoor also becomes a living room, living space. So you don't have to build too much. you could also manage with outdoor spaces. For example, there's no room that can accommodate more than 150 people per inside, but there have been 200 to 2,000 people conducted there, where outdoors come in at a different time, available with a comfortable environment, like that. So, all that passive design strategy. We also had active version for without battery, the solar panel, as well as 9-meter dia dishes to cook, generate heat to cook, and of course, solar heater and things like that. And it's been 18 years, and things have been always added upon and all without really consuming the land resource. And so I think it was that whole overarching principle and learn from, again, traditional vernacular architecture of Ahmedabad. That, for example, Ahmedabad, poor houses, that they have vertically projecting profile, that first floor projects beyond the ground floor and second floor beyond the first floor and roof even beyond the second floor, like that. So when sun is overhead, the whole facade is in the shade, and therefore there's no heat transmission inside. Same thing here. We applied with a simple calculator to know the solar azimuth and what time of the critical month of the year would you like, how much projection, which would give enough effective shading over there. So simple things learned out of those traditional architecture. The courtyard is another feature. Three-part window, top one for ventilator, middle one for view, and lower one for the breeze. And we made a contemporary version of that with the louvers and glass and all. So you get all these three functions, but you had control to yourself. So I think you could manage by season and by the needs of the activity, permute and combine. So I think a lot of these simple, common sensible principles gave this resolution, and again, very contemporary aesthetic coming out of that. But all design decision coming out of environmental concern, coming out of, again, that idea of austerity and simplicity. That's what the Gandhian Institute believed in. And as an NGO, they did not have much of the financial resource to put this up. So we had the idea of flexibility. It's been growing over 18 years. So even those kind of things had been factored in, that it doubled its capacity without really encroaching onto the open land, etc. So I think a lot of those foresight about any institutes that you designed, any kind of concerns that you have about the resource management, and of course, passive way with which you can manage the climate. There have been list dependence on air conditioning or stuff like that for usual comfort, etc. And again, this project was also appreciated by fraternity and in academia. It's in every school's kind of case study. I'm not trying to, harp on the laurel, but I'm trying to say that, architectural field research needs to be demonstrated and has to go on site with performance results. And this was able to kind of demonstrate that even in contemporary times, there are all these basic principles very possible, and not only possible but required to be incorporated. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel and alphabet from A again. I think with the repository of wisdom that we have from our vernacular architecture, which have even perfected over time the traditional, as well as they have been responsive to the local context. So if we learn from that, I think we can use them very meaningfully for the given context. Ahmedabad houses have courtyard and they harvest the roof water. They have tankas, they have the subterranean water tank. And I think it was the same wisdom that naturally inspired us to think on those. So I think it was just a contemporary translation of some of those traditional principles and ethos of sustainable built environment, which is socio-culturally responsive and aesthetically pleasing.
So, sir, how does your studio address the challenge of educating clients on the value of green design in markets driven by cost efficiency?
Yes, see, there have been instances, as I said, that you have to accept the bottom lines that typically the client would come through. And once you respect that, I think the client also hires you for the kind of values that you share. But what are their bottom lines typically? One is the cost overruns. So they say that, okay, if you want to try something, don't make us the guinea pig. So performance and the cost should not be at his shoulder. Second, aesthetics should not be compromised. And third, the functional efficiency and other things, had to be there. So when you say that none of these are going to be flouted, and still if we are able to add value, and that's what I say, design is about adding value. So it's not just satisfaction of the programmatic requirement that the client brings, but what can you add to that? For example, school is a school, there's a standard program, but if you think that it is learning beyond classroom, if you think that outdoors play important part, if you think exploration has to be an integral thing, if you think nature inspires, then your design with that added value would be very different and beyond satisfaction of the program. So when you respect the program given by the climate for its given efficiency, when you respect the economics, and when you think that aesthetically you're not compromising, then I think anything further is then a matter of dialogue to make him understand. For example, one of the residences that we designed in Vadodara for a happy, rich client, and it was a father-son kind of a couple, and staying together, but it's sort of semi identity that each has its own kind of a world, and yet they can come together. It's just an open of a door. So the brief really was that they already had been living in another bungalow kind of a type, and this was a little outskirts or larger plot with a big garden possible. And the client says that, look, I'm close to 70, and I want to enjoy my life, and I want to be very comfortable. So I think we will go for centrally air conditioned house. And I think the natural material might give a lot of maintenance issue. And at this age, I don't want to be succumbing to that. So all the man-made material and central AC. Literally, that was the brief. But I'm very basic about the thing, 8 bedroom between two houses, whatever it was just incidental. And we discussed that I get what you opt to, and I'm nobody to say that you use air conditioning or not use air conditioning. But the pity would be that if you are in air conditioned space, you would not step out to the garden. And that is basically the resource that you have in this house. So at least give me to allow me to put myself a challenge of making from architectural sort of resolution it comfortable as much, and then selective AC. So when you need it, put in, not from the beginning that it has to be only conditioned by that. And then he said, okay, I have no problem. And then anytime after that I went, he remembered and he said that, oh, I'd given a very big overhang on the veranda outdoors, opening onto the garden. And he said that we love this space. We sit here often. And that's also the place they often had breakfast together. Whenever I lived there, I was entertained with breakfast there in that place. So, and even the material we had Kota stone suggested there, very local, one of the cheapest. Now there's always that hype about other materials, and he said that no, we want now the vitrified tile. I think we feel it's very easy to manage, etc. We had given the drawing for the quota. We also went and selected, to respect his decision, the tiles, but we argued the advantages or the reasons for the thing. And after selecting, when he went back, we did it in Ahmedabad, the selection, and he went to Vadodara, where the house is. And I got a call and said, Yatin bhai, I think we'll go with the Kota stone idea. So I think both of these primary requirement, but it was not my kind of ego or my kind of emphasis. I would have been very happy to use any other material, but I thought that this would be more relevant, and the kind of value that we are always also held about integrating the craft into any design whenever it's possible. So we told them that you natural stone material, we will be able to do inlays and that will be more unique than the most expensive material that you choose from the factory production. Somebody else would have had it and it would be only applied in a standard way. While here it would become unique to each place and all. And I think eventually we were able to make those craft engagement and inlays and other things in every room according to the layout, etc. And it has turned out to be a very unique sort of resolution for each space. So that then to even why talk of only the rich which have certain strong ideas? When we did post earthquake rehabilitation, up in 26 January 2001 around Kutch, and very first project that we did with an NGO, yes, Manav, Sadhna, etc. And it was in a remotest village, and we just we knew we approached them when we asked about their needs and all. These people were very expert and used to make earthen houses, the round circular one called bunga, and when you ask them, they say, "Oh, we want high-rise concrete apartment like we see in your cities," and they were not right solutions for their culture. We saw their bhunga, even though outside would go 47 to 52, because right in the middle of desert would still have not more than 32, 35 kind of temperature inside, and one fan, if at all, would do wonders over there. It was what they were very skilled to operate, and their houses had beautiful interiors with mud and mirror kind of designs, etc. And it represented their cultures. It was very close to their lifestyle. And they were able to repair or manage. Every Diwali, they would repaint and kind of plaster it, etc. So we said that, look, they had kept diaries of people who visited, etc., from decades earlier. It said that people come to your house because they want to see you in your own habitat, which is very unique. And as a result, even your economic benefit is there. That shawl that you make is cheaper by 10 rupee in the market than we buy from you directly. But people come here and then, you know, and a lot of those things, etc. And then first, 20 poorest family, the Harijan family came forth that, okay, we don't mind, we doing this kind of a housing. So we did a participatory process in more than many ways there because it was system overnight disrupted. And we found that nothing had happened despite the closest to epicenter kind of settlement within 20-kilometer range. And it had nothing damaged to the traditional housing, which was kacha mud houses, as against the new stone and brick units had given way, the same place and same impact. So not only it was earthquake resistant because over time they had perfected that technique, the process of earthquake or the shocks they would have got even for past several centuries, and therefore they knew how to manage that. They used local material, and we did the analysis. There's 7 basic reasons why it would have been earthquake resistant. So that was our reason to promote it. So we did first research, observed their lifestyle, asked them, and then suggested and dialogued that why this was a better type. And trust me, the 20 Harijan families, the poorest, started, the landless ones. And by the time we finished, we had to stop at 355 houses because now even the rich in the Muslim community also came in and all that. So it was just a matter of figuring out, like doctor, what was appropriate, and then seeing that that becomes their basis. And when they did their own house, not only they were expert about balancing the clay and mixing what kind of plasticizer or what kind of fibers and all, but they had expertise of making blocks without the cement out of the rammed earth presses, rams, etc. But they earn livelihood making their own houses. They would do the best they can. So there's no kind of mismatch about what they want and what comes out. We even created an interactive system of plan making so that they could choose their neighbors also. So that was social engineering, that all the life they had to be next to someone, and somewhere brothers created a cluster, somewhere by their social norm they created that location and all. And they even we had first a different orientation, and they said no, by our social belief and taboos we can't face this direction, we prefer to orient to this direction. So it became an appropriate solution. And in that, as I've been saying, that we could bring in the newer dimension, including technology. For example, smokeless stove, which they did not have, but now they could adapt to for a cleaner kitchen air quality. There was no door-to-door sanitation, which now we could bring into them, and they overnight very willingly adapted to that. We even had a kind of, from where the soil was dug in just middle of desert where drought was the norm, 3 inch of rainfall and it became a reservoir. So they could now get the water, and because of that, they started cultivating. So the whole ecology changed as a result of that. So I think all those kinds of things where, again, like a doctor, that if somebody even does not have disease and if the placebo also helps psychologically. So likewise, you have to know what is appropriate, not just to please the client, but I think, and for that, you have to do a very serious research and you have to understand that context very well. Like we used to slip and live there in those villages, have a meeting with the whole village, and then derive something, having observed things, documented things, analyzed things, and then also heard them for the kind of things which you would have missed not being part of that. So again, like the doctor, you hear this history, story, observe, and then you derive your own kind of conclusion. So this is where there might be like even this recycle waste one, as I say that when it came to using liquor bottle into the thing, and they are the Gandhian Institute, and they thought that how can liquor bottle be part of our, although it was an empty thing which was otherwise waste and thrown out. And in fact, one of the trustee himself, the senior trustee, said that we are doing a Gandhian job by burying from the circulation. So I think it's a good job. And likewise, so I think once, as I say, you follow the bottom line that client has, then I think it becomes very convincing. So some of these conflicts that initially, but that way even client becomes not only aware, but then he would confide with it. He would have, and it's not only for alternative, anything that once client knows that out of so many alternative, why this was the best and appropriate. And then he would also himself have that conviction and faith that, yeah, we didn't do this because all the time, relatives and friends would come and say, oh, today, aajkal to fog chal raha hai, why not this? But, he can then feel not got swayed away by the opinions, but he knows why this was the most appropriate and right thing to do. So that's, I think, also the obligation to keep a client with you and sail him along with all those design decisions. And that's why this participatory approach, right from the concept to execution and even interiors for that matter, helps. And I think that should be the approach all along.
So, with reference to your Gandhi New Gum project, what were the key challenges were faced in designing for disaster resilience in the post-earthquake concept?
As I said, that it was not just one village which we started with, one of the first, but there were 18 villages that we were embarked on. And as I said, to break the mindset or to try something and, tell them what was more relevant, which they fancied, like, for example, other villages they when we asked them what kind of thing that you like, and they say society planning. What they meant was society planning, and for them, row barrack like thing was the right thing to do. Very disciplined, rows. And when you see their own clusters, they were more like friendly clusters with intermediate spaces, with hierarchy and network of open spaces, etc., which we know works better. And in fact, in urban area, we learn from traditional and rural contexts the value of those rather than the planned housing, which are very boring and esoteric. So we actually had an interactive kit for all 18 villages. We set with the, of course, there we have to work with social NGO and others to break the ice and be there. We documented from the debris, the plan and the structure of the unit, etc. We talked to them, and then we created the social kind of mixing as per their choice. That okay, we would, they said Sisoti planning and we said Jhumka planning. They meant linear rows and we said clusters. We said that, okay, one cluster consisting of a likewise group of people, not economically, because they were varied kind of plot sizes given by the norms of government at that point in time. But that should not be that all 250 square meter be together and 400 be together. So we gave them the kind of thing, and in a very short time, they came up with that, okay, even though he's my brother, I don't get along with him, but I like to be with this group of people. And that's how they emerged with the right clusters, and then which cluster can get along with who, and likewise. And then we used our understanding of the climate, that okay, this direction is good or not, the movement structure, so there's no waste, the cattle movement versus the vehicular movement or the pedestrian movement. So I think the fusion of both arrived at a resolution. Now, that resolution done participatorily overcame the preconceived notion. And even when you say and once again, the best compliment that I got was that one of the mukhis, the sarpanch of the village, when the thing was done and at the inauguration, when they started moving in, when we went there, and he reminded that, remember, we were talking about society planning and you gave us the cluster planning. And I remember, and we are so happy to have adapted to something like that. So they remembered both versions and then they liked the version that was proposed. So I think you made your own presence also count. Another thing was that it was a immediate shelter, because earthquake and what you created was not economically and by the area the complete structure. So what we had to find out was the seed on which they can grow, and grow without again backfiring in terms of technicalities of earthquake resistance. So even our detailing and the core things that we started with, for example, kitchen, a multi-purpose room, wash area, and the veranda, they were the very basic component of most houses or all houses. And how do we give that with a suggested idea, including we work with three-dimensional physical models, that look, this is your house, but you can add a room here later on, you can add this here, you can do first floor also. That was also by the interactive process, that village doesn't mean that it has to be only a ground house. They said that we even stock our hay stock there for the drought days and whatnot. And so we consulted and came up with those. So I think the challenge was to understand their cultural pattern, understand what was traditionally to continue and continuum of tradition versus the introduction of new. Because and we couldn't just say that, okay, now this is your house by a lottery, because it has overnight disrupted, and the whole generations they are going to be in that. So that social engineering was another important factor, and for that, teaming up with the NGOs who could gain the kind of confidence of the community, and then confide in certain things and be able to communicate and share the thoughts and the concerns and the concepts. So I think it is those kinds of dimensions, and of course within the economic range, because this had to be even by government norm. In fact, most of our what solutions we came up with, for example, the earth one, construction, it was not that all houses we did that way. So it was also appropriate that somewhere there was stone as a good local material. Somewhere there was no other thing possible because of its extremity, and we did even the cement block. So I have no hesitation, being proud of even that solution, which was more appropriate there. So for each, the participatory process remained, the site plan to construction, wherever self-help remained, getting the whole kind of social engineering remained, and deriving each resolution relevant to its own place, people, and planet kind of concern. All that remained, and yet all of them emerged very unique to that place, and people adapted to it. We won uh, Habitat Award citation, United Nations, and after 10 years, we were asked to monitor, and they were writing a chapter on each of these winning projects, and we were asked to revisit and give observations on the lessons learned. Even if it was a failure, that was fine. And to our delight and satisfaction or fulfillment, not only people received us warmly after a decade, and even recently we went after 2 decades, but apart from that human bond, we found that the same people who were asking for apartments had actually continued building more the bungas the way they used to, and it actually became their resource that they were now, you know, kind of having the guests stay over, those tourists who go to, because it is also a touristic kind of region, and the government initiative to develop tourism, and they give homestay, so it became their economic kind of base, and even a government sponsored kind of a tourism spot. There is a tour which brings them to this village, because this is one of the few surviving traditionally architectured village. So they are also getting the footfall where their handicraft things are being sold directly to this potential buyers. So economically, they are well off. They are visible now, and they have been able to grow this settlement from basic what we had given. We had given only two bunga and one square choki, and each of these places they have grown further over 2 decades and have flourished. We even gave some amenities, and they are also well used. Somewhere, as I said, this reservoir or a Bowlies or those kinds of infrastructure things also help them. So I think seeing that not just as emergency construction, that's what was the whole point, but to see that it's their home and a community neighborhood, and how it would change not only the social kind of engineering, but also quality of life, basically, and it would become a new ecology there. And as I said, that with that water in a desert settlement, even change the ecology with agriculture and vegetation coming in there.
So, sir, what future innovations in sustainable architecture excite you the most, and how does your studio plan to incorporate them?
I think for me, it's like back to future, you know. So it's not turning backward, but I think being aware about the kind of approaches, I'm not saying the formula, that we learned or we learn from the traditional wisdom. It's just not being egoistic to kind of throw it out just because looking at the manufacturing date. I think we should look at the expiry date. And that's one error we do because of the hype in India, that, oh, it's grandmother's time, it's not fashionable. But actually, fashion repeats every now and then. And forget fashion, that if, as I said, for the basic performance reasons of its timeless aesthetics, of its environmental management despite no electricity and mechanized services, as well as socio-cultural appropriateness, because it not only derived from the people and place but also perfected over time. If we can learn from this, at least we don't have to repeat the alphabet from A. We can start from Z onwards. We can have alpha, beta, gamma, whatever coming after, but we would be better off to take things further rather than reinventing the wheel all over again. So I think in that light, there is enough to pick up from there, that even if you have to use air conditioning, but why not think of natural ventilation for the time where that is comfortable? For example, what gave us the license to have fixed glazing in a hotel room? Many places, and especially in the late evening hours where you use the rooms, it's less than even temperature of the AC outside, and still, because of the fixed glazing, you have to run an air condition to get 24 inside. Why could I not open the window and with no electricity, get a cool environment inside whenever it's available. So I think those, or, what gave us the liberty to have no ventilation and light in a toilet? Our time when we studied, there was always one professor who would always look for natural ventilation in a toilet or in a kitchen, etc. There was no freedom available to think of exhaust or mechanized light or other services. You had to first make it naturally, and then additionally, you can do what other supplements. What gave us a right to have dark, non-ventilated, non-natural light view ventilation corridor, doubly loaded corridor in a hotel or sometimes even an institute. And I can show you many IGBC certified or LEED certified buildings with no light ventilation even on May afternoon into these corridors. And if they have to run an electricity at that time, that is crime. Running electricity is not a crime, but in daytime where we need goggles to diffuse light, and that time if you need to have bulb to illuminate the place, that's crime. So I think somewhere that dependence on mechanized services and external props as against first thing first, and as I say, sustainability starts with humility. And humility means that it starts with way of life. First, you adjust your daily routine. For example, most hot countries have siesta routine. Why work in such an uncomfortable condition? There was a study done in Japan that if the chief executives, they were relieved of their ties, tuxedo, terrelin suit dresses, they would find same comfort with casuals with few degree less warmer AC temperature, or few degree warmer temperature. So it was the dressing the culprit to have to check up AC to give them the right comfort. So I think it starts with the food. I'm a very naive rule. The hotter the place, spicier the palate, so that you sweat. To the dressing that we can dress and undress. So layering accessories, for example, swing in a hot dry climate. So when you swing, like what fan does with electrical energy is what you do with muscle power, and you can find the coolness by the evaporative cooling of your body itself and keeping it comfortable. To the built environment which relied on insulation as well as ventilation as well as outdoor spaces. So in a comfortable time you could be on terrace or on an ota or on outdoors, so not overbuild. Use local material, control at your hand, so three-part window or jali which brought in light, ventilation and view but not the glare and haze. Courtyard, so that you could get illumination and ventilation and even audio and video kind of connect with the upper floors and yet not bring in the glare, etc. So there were all these meaningful, sensible kind of solutions. And I think if we learn from that and apply it with very contemporary techniques and contemporary, demands, I think we would be better off that way. And therefore, my mantra always has been that inspire from yesterday and yet aspire for tomorrow, and that would create your realities for today. So I think that wisdom somewhere that we need to be one aware. So if we acknowledge, we would kind of adapt, and if we adopt, I think we'll be that much better off. And as I say that, it's, I think, a direction for tomorrow. And again, tradition has survived over time because it has constantly adapted to the change time and circumstance. So to think that tradition is outdated and yesterday, that's history, not the tradition. And I think that's where, if we just don't bring in the hype and undue kind of, sort of mind blocks about them, I think in India we would have better answers to sort of combat for challenges that we have. Most of these have been affordable solutions, etc. So I think first refuse to have things which you don't need, then reduce your needs, then reuse what you already have, then recycle, which needs some adaptation, then reinterpret, always respond, and then eventually even regenerate. So I think it's all of these that needs to come in play for tomorrow. So tomorrow to me is a continuum of yesterday, and I think appropriately we have to channelize it in that sense.
So, what a beautiful answer. I mean, just wow. So, sir, for the last question for the day. So, in your experience, can you share an advice, a very special advice you would like to give the young professionals who are pursuing sustainable architecture now?
I would say for our context, rather than giving Gandhian currency the value, let's make Gandhian value itself the currency to develop. And I think we would have added value. And I think design can change and for better can improve the quality of lives. That should be the goal. And once you have that, again, like Gandhi said, that you think of the downtrodden or the worst, and then whatever of the doubts that you have about picking this or picking that would melt away, and you know what is right. There's nothing beautiful or ugly, it's always appropriate or inappropriate. And I think, again, like doctor, treat each place, people, and context on its own term and come up with the right diagnosis which is appropriate, and then therefore an appropriate treatment and approach.
So, sir, this was the last question for the day, even though I don't want to say goodbye to you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for giving your precious time. It was a pleasure to have you here. And don't forget to sign up on the Fabulous website.